The waitress had no idea she was being tested, no idea the struggling father and disabled son were billionaires in disguise, no idea that her simple act of kindness was about to unlock doors she never dreamed possible. The rain hammered against the cracked windows of Rosie's roadside diner, each drop creating rivulets that distorted the neon signs, bleeding color into the October darkness. The smell of burnt coffee and grease hung thick in the air, mixing with the distant rumble of 18-wheelers pulling off Interstate 95. It was the kind of place most people drove past without a second glance, weathered, forgotten, clinging to survival one meal at a time. Maya Rodriguez wiped down the sticky Formica counter for the 100th time that shift, her calloused hands moving in practiced circles. At 23, she had the kind of exhaustion that settled deep in your bones, the weight of double shifts and unpaid bills pressing down on her shoulders like a lead blanket. Her black hair was pulled back in a messy bun, wisps escaping to frame her tired brown eyes. The name tag pinned to her faded uniform read Maya in crooked letters, held on by a safety pin because the original clasp had broken months ago. She glanced at the clock above the grill. 11:47 p.m. 13 minutes until closing, and she could finally drag herself back to the trailer park where her sick mother waited for the insulin Maya had been stretching to last another week. The bell above the door chimed, cutting through the ambient hum of the ancient refrigerator. Maya looked up, suppressing a sigh. Late-night customers were usually truckers grabbing coffee for the road, but these two were different. A man in his 40s shuffled through the doorway, his expensive sneakers hidden beneath torn jeans and a faded hoodie that had seen better days. His hair was disheveled, stubble darkening his jawline, and his shoulders carried the slumped weight of exhaustion. But it was his eyes that caught Maya's attention, sharp, calculating, constantly scanning, like a man who was used to seeing everything even when he appeared to notice nothing. Behind him, moving with careful, labored steps, came a teenage boy. The kid couldn't have been more than 16, thin and pale, his movements jerky and uncontrolled. His left hand trembled as he gripped a worn wooden cane, his feet dragging slightly with each step. When he spoke, his words came out slurred and halting. "Dad, I'm really hungry," the boy managed, his voice thick with what sounded like a speech impediment. Maya's heart clenched. She had seen that look before, the mixture of frustration and resignation that came with a body that wouldn't cooperate, with a world that stared and whispered and looked away. What she didn't know was that the father was Trevor White, CEO of White Industries, worth $3.2 billion. The empire he'd built from nothing now employed over 50,000 people across 12 countries. Every decision he made could shift stock prices, create or destroy communities, change the trajectory of thousands of lives. And the disabled boy, that was Marcus, Trevor's 17-year-old son, perfectly healthy, a star athlete at his private academy, currently performing the role of his life. For the past 6 months, Trevor had been conducting what he called humanity audits at businesses across the country. He wanted to know who his people really were when they thought nobody important was watching. The results had been disappointing. Out of 23 tests, only 2 employees had shown genuine compassion. The rest had been polite at best, openly dismissive at worst. One manager at a White Industries subsidiary actually suggested the disabled customer use the service entrance to avoid making other patrons uncomfortable. That manager was no longer employed. Trevor had heard about Maya from one of his regional directors, a young woman working 3 jobs to support her ailing mother, never missing a shift despite her own struggles, treating every customer with the same dignity regardless of their appearance or ability to tip. Tonight would determine if those reports were accurate. Maya grabbed 2 menus from behind the counter, her smile genuine despite her exhaustion. "Y'all come sit anywhere you'd like. I'll be right with you." The father guided his son to a booth near the back, away from the few remaining customers. Maya noticed how gently he helped the boy into his seat, how he positioned the cane within easy reach, how his rough exterior melted into something softer when he looked at his child. "Take your time," Maya said, setting down the menus. "Can I start you off with something to drink?" The boy's head bobbed unevenly as he tried to focus on the menu. Can I have chocolate milk?" The words came out broken, self-conscious. "Of course, sweetheart," Maya said without missing a beat, her voice warm and natural. "And for you, sir?" Trevor, maintaining his tired father act, rubbed his stubbled jawline. "Just coffee, black. It's been a long day." As Maya walked away, Trevor watched her carefully. No strange looks at Marcus, no uncomfortable shifting, no speaking louder or slower like so many people did when they encountered someone with disabilities. She had treated his son like any other customer. Round 1 passed. At the counter, Maya filled a tall glass with chocolate milk, adding a bendy straw without being asked. She'd learned that small details mattered when someone's hands didn't work quite right. She poured Trevor's coffee into a thick ceramic mug, the kind that stayed warm longer. Behind her, she could hear Darren, the night cook, muttering under his breath as he scraped the grill clean. "Great. More weirdos. Can't they see we're trying to close?" She shot him a sharp look. "They're customers, Darren, same as anyone else." "Yeah, well, the kid's giving me the creeps with all that twitching." Maya's jaw tightened. She'd grown up with a cousin who had cerebral palsy, had seen the way people's discomfort turned into cruelty without them even realizing it. "Keep your voice down," she hissed, "and show some respect." She carried the drinks back to the booth, setting them down carefully. Marcus's hand shook as he reached for the chocolate milk, and Maya noticed him struggling with the straw. "Here, hun," she said gently, adjusting the straw's angle. "Sometimes these things have a mind of their own." Marcus looked up at her, and for just a moment his act faltered. There was something in her eyes, not pity, not discomfort, just kindness, pure, uncomplicated kindness. It was the kind of look his father received regularly, but only because people knew who he was, what he was worth, what he could do for them or take away. But Maya was different. She treated Marcus like she would any customer, any person. There was no performance in her kindness, no calculation. It just was. "She's really nice," Marcus whispered, dropping his act for just a moment when Maya was out of earshot. Trevor nodded, his own voice low. "She is. Question is, how far does that niceness extend?" They were about to find out. The test had been going perfectly until Vincent Kellerman walked in. Kellerman was a regular, a long-haul trucker with a beer gut, stained clothes, and the kind of casual bigotry that he wore like a badge of honor. He slumped into a booth 2 tables away from Trevor and Marcus, his voice carrying easily across the small diner. "Maya, honey, get me the usual, and make it quick. I got miles to cover." Maya nodded, already pouring coffee. She'd served Kellerman dozens of times over the past year. He was rude, demanding, and never tipped, but his money was as good as anyone's. That's when Kellerman noticed Marcus. The boy was still struggling with his food, his movements jerky and uncontrolled. A piece of meatloaf fell from his fork, landing on the table with a soft splat. Marcus made a frustrated noise, reaching for his napkin. Kellerman's face twisted with disgust. "Jesus Christ," he said loudly enough for the entire diner to hear. "Can't you people keep that thing under control?" The words hit the diner like a physical blow. Trevor's hands tightened around his coffee mug, every muscle in his body coiling with barely controlled rage. In his real life, nobody would dare speak about his son, about anyone like that. He could destroy Kellerman with a phone call, ruin his credit, get him blacklisted from every trucking company in the country. But tonight, he was just another tired father in a roadside diner. He had to play the role. Marcus, meanwhile, had gone perfectly still. This wasn't part of the act anymore. The hurt in his eyes was completely real. He'd never been spoken to like that in his life, never been reduced to a thing by a stranger's cruelty. Maya froze behind the counter, Kellerman's coffee pot still in her hand. The diner had gone silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant rumble of trucks on the interstate. "Excuse me," Maya's voice was quiet, controlled, but there was steel underneath. Kellerman waved a dismissive hand toward Marcus. "Look at him, making a mess, making those noises. It's disgusting. I'm trying to eat here." This was the moment Trevor had been waiting for, the moment when Maya would have to choose between keeping a regular customer happy and standing up for two strangers she'd never see again, the moment when her true character would reveal itself. Maya set down the coffee pot very carefully. When she turned to face Kellerman, her expression was calm, but her brown eyes were blazing. "That thing you're talking about is a person, a young man having dinner with his father, and if you can't handle sharing space with other human beings, maybe you should consider eating at home." Kellerman's face reddened. "Don't you dare lecture me, little girl. I've been coming here longer than you've been working here. I don't need some minimum wage waitress telling me." "You need someone to tell you, because apparently nobody ever taught you basic human decency." Trevor watched, mesmerized. Maya was maybe 5'4", couldn't weigh more than 120 pounds, but she was facing down a man twice her size without flinching. Her voice never rose, never wavered, but the authority in it was absolute. "That young man is doing nothing wrong," Maya continued, her voice carrying across the diner. "He's eating dinner, he's being polite, he's not bothering anyone except you, and your problem isn't with him, it's with your own ugliness." "I want to speak to your manager," Kellerman snarled, rising from his booth. "Don't back down an inch. Manager's not here, just me. And here's what's going to happen. You're going to pay for your meal, leave a decent tip for once in your miserable life, and get out. Or you can keep running your mouth, and I'll call the state police to come escort you off the property." The standoff stretched for what felt like hours, but was probably less than 30 seconds. Finally, Kellerman threw a 20 on the table and stormed toward the door. "You'll regret this. I know people. I can get you fired." Maya's smile was cold as winter. "Good luck with that." The door slammed behind him, rattling the windows. Maya stood there for a moment, her hands shaking slightly from adrenaline, then turned back to Trevor and Marcus. "I'm sorry you had to hear that," she said, her voice gentle again. "Some people they forget how to be human." Marcus looked up at her, his eyes shining. You didn't have to do that." Maya knelt beside their booth, bringing herself to eye level with the boy. "Yes, I did. Nobody gets to talk about you like that. Nobody." Trevor felt something crack open in his chest. In 30 years of building his empire, he'd met presidents and prime ministers, brilliant minds and powerful personalities. But he'd never met anyone quite like Maya Rodriguez. She had just lost a regular customer, potentially her job, to defend two strangers she'd never see again. And she'd done it without hesitation, without calculation, without thinking about the cost. "Are you going to be in trouble?" Trevor asked, his voice rougher than intended. Maya shrugged. "Maybe, but some things are more important than keeping jerks happy." She looked at Marcus again. "You finish your dinner, sweetheart. Don't let people like him take up space in your head." As Maya walked back to the counter, Trevor made a decision that would change 3 lives forever. After they finished eating, Trevor left a $50 tip on a $30 meal. Maya tried to give back the change, but he waved her off. "Thank you," he said simply, "for everything." Maya's smile was tired but genuine. "Y'all drive safe, okay? And you," she pointed at Marcus, "don't let anyone make you feel small. You're perfect exactly as you are." Trevor and Marcus walked out into the rain, leaving Maya alone with the closing duties and the memory of what had just happened. She had no idea it was the most important night of her life. The next morning dawned gray and drizzly, matching Maya's mood as she trudged toward her mother's trailer. The confrontation with Kellerman replayed in her mind, along with the nagging worry that she might have cost herself her job. In a town where work was scarce and bills were plenty, she couldn't afford to make enemies. Her phone buzzed with a text from Rosie, the diner's owner. "Maya, call me. We need to talk." Maya's stomach dropped. This was it. Kellerman had made good on his threat. She was fumbling for her keys when she heard the sound of expensive engines purring up the gravel road. Two vehicles, a sleek black Mercedes and a silver Bentley, looked impossibly out of place in the Sunset Mobile Home Park, like luxury watches in a dollar store. The car stopped in front of her trailer. Her heart hammered as the Mercedes door opened and the same tired father from last night stepped out. But he looked different. The worn clothes were gone, replaced by a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. The stubble had been shaved clean, revealing sharp cheekbones and a strong jaw. His posture was straighter, more commanding, radiating the kind of authority that came with power. From the passenger seat emerged the boy, Marcus. But he was walking normally. No cane, no trembling, no slurred speech. He moved with the fluid grace of an athlete, completely transformed from the struggling teenager she'd served just hours before. My mind reeled, trying to process what she was seeing. What's going on? Trevor stepped forward, and when he spoke, his voice carried a crisp authority that commanded attention. "Miss Rodriguez, my name is Trevor White. Last night I served my son and I at Rosie's Diner." Trevor White. The name hit her like a physical blow. Everyone knew that name. The billionaire CEO whose face appeared on magazine covers, whose company employed half the county through various subsidiaries and suppliers. "You were testing me," Maya said slowly, the pieces clicking together. "The whole thing was fake." "Not all of it," Marcus said, his voice clear and strong now. "Your kindness was real. The way you treated me, that was real." Trevor nodded. "For the past 6 months, I've been conducting what I call humanity audits, testing how people treat others when they think nobody important is watching." His expression hardened. "Most people fail." Maya's cheeks burned with embarrassment and anger. "So this was all some sick game to you? Making fun of people with real disabilities?" "No," Trevor's voice was sharp. "This was about finding people with real character. People like you." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick envelope. "Last night, you lost your job defending my son. Kellerman called your boss at 6 this morning threatening to organize a boycott unless you were fired." Maya's knees nearly buckled. She'd known it was coming, but hearing it confirmed felt like a punch to the gut. "I called Rosie 30 minutes later," Trevor continued. "I bought the diner." Maya stared at him. "You what?"
"I bought Rosie's roadside diner for 3 times its market value. Rosie's retirement is now fully funded, and she's spending the winter in Florida, like she's always dreamed." Trevor held out the envelope. "These are the deed and the keys. The diner is yours now." Maya's hands shook as she took the envelope, afraid to believe what she was hearing. "I don't understand." "You stood up for someone you thought was vulnerable when it would have been easier to stay silent," Trevor said. "You chose human dignity over customer service. You risked your livelihood to defend a stranger." His voice softened slightly. In my experience, that kind of character is rarer than gold. Maya opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside were legal documents, keys, and a cashier's check that made her gasp out loud. The amount was enough to renovate the diner, pay off her mother's medical bills, and still have more money than she'd ever dreamed of having. "There's more," Trevor said. "White Industries has several restaurant chains. I'd like to offer you a partnership, help you expand, modernize, create something bigger than a single diner. If you're interested." Maya looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "Why? Why me?" Trevor glanced at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. "Because you saw my son as a person, not a problem. Because you defended him without thinking about the cost. Because in a world where most people only show kindness when it benefits them, you showed it when it cost you everything." Marcus stepped forward. "And because you made me feel normal for the first time in, well, ever. Not like a CEO's son, not like a rich kid, just normal. That meant something." Maya wiped her eyes, trying to process the magnitude of what was happening. "My mother, she's sick. She needs taken care of," Trevor said simply. "Best doctors, best treatment, whatever she needs." For a moment, Maya couldn't speak. She thought about her mother struggling to breathe in the tiny trailer bedroom, about the insulin rationing, about the double shifts and sleepless nights. She thought about the diner, her diner now, and all the good she could do with it. "There's more," Trevor said, his tone becoming serious again. Maya tensed. Here it comes, she thought, the catch. "You keep being exactly who you are," he said. "Don't let success change your heart. The world needs more people like you, not fewer." Maya looked at the envelope in her hands, then at Trevor and Marcus standing in the gray morning light. 6 months ago, she was nobody special. Just another waitress in a forgotten diner, struggling to make ends meet. Now she was a business owner, a partner in a multi-million-dollar company, and a woman whose simple act of kindness had changed everything. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. Marcus grinned, the same genuine smile she'd seen the night before, but brighter now. "Say you'll keep the chocolate milk on the menu. Best I ever had." Maya laughed through her tears. "Deal." As Trevor and Marcus drove away, Maya stood in front of her trailer holding the keys to her new life. She thought about Vincent Kellerman, who'd tried to destroy her for standing up to his cruelty, never knowing that his hatred had led to her salvation. She thought about all the other customers she'd served over the years, the ones who barely saw her, the ones who treated her like part of the furniture, the ones who forgot that waitresses were human beings with dreams and struggles and dignity. And she thought about the choice she'd made the night before, to see Marcus as a person first, everything else second. It was a choice that had cost her one life and given her another. 6 months later, Maya's Diner had become the most popular restaurant in 3 counties. She'd kept the home-style cooking, but upgraded everything else. New equipment, expanded seating, a staff of 12 people who were paid living wages with full benefits. The walls were covered with photos of customers, local families, and community events. There was a special section dedicated to accessibility, with comfortable seating and adaptive utensils available for anyone who needed them. Trevor and Marcus stopped by regularly, sometimes for business meetings, sometimes just for the meatloaf and chocolate milk. Maya had learned that beneath Trevor's intimidating exterior was a man who'd grown up poor, who remembered what it felt like to be invisible, who'd built his empire partly to ensure he'd never be powerless again. Marcus, meanwhile, had become like a younger brother to her. He volunteered at the diner on weekends, working with customers who had disabilities, showing them the same dignity Maya had shown him. The partnership with White Industries had grown beyond anyone's expectations. Maya now oversaw a chain of 12 diners across the state, each one committed to the same values: good food, fair wages, and treating every customer like family. But her favorite part of every day was still the same. Standing behind the counter of the original diner, watching families share meals, listening to truckers swap stories, serving chocolate milk to kids whose eyes lit up at the simple pleasure of a bendy straw. Because in the end, that's what it was all about. Seeing people, really seeing them, and choosing kindness even when nobody's watching. Especially when nobody's watching. The bell above the door chimed, and Maya looked up to see a young father helping his elderly mother into a booth. The woman moved slowly, her hands shaking with age, and Maya could see the exhaustion in the man's eyes, the weight of caring for someone you love when life keeps getting harder. Maya grabbed 2 menus and walked over, her smile genuine and warm. "Y'all come sit anywhere you'd like, I'll be right with you." Because some things never change. Some things shouldn't change. And sometimes the smallest acts of kindness create the biggest transformations. Would you have done the same? Would you have stood up for a stranger when it cost you everything? Don't just scroll past this story if you believe kindness matters. Share it with someone who needs to remember that we all have the power to change lives, starting with how we treat the person right in front of us. Like this video if you believe character matters more than comfort. Subscribe if you want more stories that restore your faith in humanity. And hit that notification bell, because in a world full of Vincent Kellermans, we need more Maya Rodriguez's. The question isn't whether the world will test your character. The question is, when it does, what will your actions say about who you really are?